And was there rain with it too, or just wind?
Both. Yeah, we had all of it. We had, Mark doesn't live far from me. I mean, we had thunder, lightning, downpour, winds.
And they apparently diverted planes away from Sky Harbor at the height of it because they were 80-mile-per-hour winds.
Wow.
It's crazy.
That was probably the best electrical storm I've seen in a long time. I mean, it was like every 5 seconds, another flash was going off in my bedroom.
Yeah, it was intense, and there's a lot of damage. I mean, just even looking in my neighborhood of downed trees, and yeah, it'll be a while digging out of this. But I hope Commissioner Watchman is safe. I mean, it sounds like he's fine, safe, but.
Did anybody see the photos out of Gila Bend this weekend?
That the flooding that's there and people standing on their roofs.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, that's terrible.
Yeah.
They're going to have a little while to dig themselves out, unfortunately.
Yeah. And there's another one coming tonight, another storm.
And then the juxtaposition with the drought. I mean, here we're being, flooded, literally, and a drought all at the same time.
Yeah.
Morning, Doug.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Brian.
Morning.
Alex. New guy.
It's nice to see new faces in the boxes on
Yeah.
our
Yeah, it's nice we got here.
It's fun adding to our team.
As we start on our adventure, right?
We're already on the journey.
We are, but we're about to go into the Sherwood Forest, I think.
Uncharted territories.
Mhm.
All right, we'll wait. Oh, it's 8 o'clock. To let everybody know, Vice Chair Watchman is held up due to some weather challenges. We hope he will join us in about an hour. But per his request, and we'll move forward with our business. I believe, Val, if you could just confirm, we have our council, we have everybody in place ready to get the meeting in order. Staff, Brian. Okay, excellent. Welcome, everybody. If you did not hear my earlier announcement, Vice Chair Watchman is struggling with some weather challenges, getting access to Wi-Fi, and will participate, we hope, in about an hour. But we will move forward with our agenda. So agenda item number 1, call to order and roll call. 1A, call for quorum. It is 8:01 a.m. on Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. I call this meeting of the Independent Redistricting Commission to order. For the record, the Executive Assistant, Valerie Newman, will be taking roll. When your name is called, please indicate you are present. If you're unable to respond verbally, we ask that you please type your name. Val.
Present.
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 Present. Thank you. And please note for the minutes that a quorum is present. Agenda item 1B, call for notice. Val, was the notice and agenda for the commission meeting properly posted 48 hours in advance of today's meeting? Thank you. Agenda item number 2, approval of minutes from August 10th, 2021, our last week's general business meeting. We have just our general session minutes. I'll open it up to any comments, edits, and if there is not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Commissioner Shireen Lerner. Commissioner Lerner. I don't know what I am today. Commissioner Lerner. I move to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Meal seconds.
Any further discussion? All right, we'll do a vote, and not having Vice Chair Watchman, messes up my order. So anyway, Commissioner Meal.
Aye.
Commissioner Lerner.
Aye.
Commissioner York.
Aye.
Commissioner Newberg is an aye, and with that, the minutes of last week are approved 4-0. Thank you again, Val. With that, we will move to agenda item number 3, opportunity for public comments. Public comment will open for a minimum of 30 minutes and remain open until the adjournment of the meeting. Comments will only be accepted electronically in writing on the link provided in the notice and agenda for this public meeting and will be limited to 3,000 characters. Please note, members of the commission may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. With that, we'll move to agenda item number 4, discussion on public comments received prior to today's meeting. I open it up to my colleagues.
This is Commissioner Lerner. I just want to again thank the public for their comments. We got some really in-depth comments. Some of you who added to comments from our public hearings, from our listening tour. So I want to say thank you for that. And also we understand some of the comments were some concerns about perhaps people that had not participated in the public hearings. And I know that we'll be talking about some of those issues later on in the agenda. So thank you for your feedback.
Yeah, if there's no other further discussion on the public comments, and I don't have much else to add aside from what we've collectively, discussed. I think most of the comments and the substance is directed to our mapping team, who is, taking notes and following it, and we will discuss, later on in the agenda. One item in particular that struck me, and we will discuss it in the upcoming items is, we had 3 of our 15 listening tour events in Maricopa County, 20%, yet upwards of 60% of our population is in Maricopa County. Maybe that was a spot that we need to go back and collect more data. But aside from that, if there's no further discussion, we can move to agenda item number 5, which is an update from our mapping consultants, Timmons and DC. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark and Doug.
Good morning, commissioners. Hope everybody's having a lovely morning so far. The first thing that I'll touch on is you guys mentioned public comments. So the last meeting, we extended the community of interest survey by 1 day. So let me share my screen with you guys. Can you guys see the dashboard? Okay.
Yes, we can.
So we got 910 submissions in total for the entire state. We've taken the dashboard that we had out there for the public comments and added some analytics there to the bottom of it. So what we can see is the Monday and Tuesday of last week, we were receiving upwards of 200 surveys a day. The Wednesday before we closed it off, we received 80. So there was definitely a big push in people putting in community interest surveys at the very end. You can sort of see in the map, we turned on the transparency a little bit more, and you can see where there's a lot of lines that that overlap each other. We're working on processing this to put it into the community of interest report, but just wanted to notate that on the map, and you can see you got some in Yavapai, you have some in Maricopa, you have some between Pinal and Nogales in the Santa Cruz County. Just some visuals there for you. I think a couple other analytic pieces that are interesting is that we asked the question of, are you submitting comments as a part or on behalf of an organization? And just a little bit over 5% said yes. So almost 95% of the public there said no. We also asked, are you being paid to submit comments? And under 1%, right under 0.99 of 1% said yes to that. So over 99% of the respondents said no, they're not being paid to submit comments. So we are getting a lot of comments from, just the regular citizen. And then here's where we asked, are you planning on attending a listening tour? So only, roughly about 35% said yes. So, over 65% of the people said no, they just are going to submit us their data in the community of interest survey. So, here's some analytics that we put together from the questions that we asked to give you some answers. It is, again, at the dashboard, open to the public. Anybody is willing to cycle through the analytics or look at the submissions just like we've had before. And then if you click back the original screen, here's the amount of surveys we receive per day. Do we have any questions on the listening tour stuff? No? Okay. I will stop sharing my screen there. So I think for us, the meetings update, that's sort of, the action items for the last meeting that we had. Going forward, we have a bunch of things to sort of discuss about meetings. I know a bunch of different topics are there. And I think the question has always become is, what are we going to do about increasing meetings per sort of our schedule going forward? And right now, I think the biggest piece to actually increase the meetings is not until we get the grid map. And once the grid map's done, then we need to start looking at how do we, get the public comments on the grid map. And for right now, what our thoughts are is, 1.5 to 2 meetings per week. So the week of the 20th, that Monday, that, we do 2 meetings, maybe a Tuesday and a Friday. The week after that, we do a Wednesday. Because remember, we got to intake a bunch of data. So people are going to be submitting public comments, emailing you guys, handing you stuff, all kinds of stuff that we're going to have to process on the back end. And then the week after that, do 2 more meetings. So that would be a total of 5 public map meetings. If you wanted to submit in the very middle, that week of the, let's see, 26, we could probably insert 1 more. So it would be 2 meetings a week for public comments. But that's sort of our schedule for, when we want to increase the number of meetings. And Doug, feel free to jump in if you got something on that.
No, I think you covered it well.
Just to be clear, are you suggesting 2 explicit meetings for mapping purposes in addition to the business meeting on Tuesday? Or are you suggesting 1 additional meeting to potentially a longer Tuesday? Because the week in between, you mentioned an additional day. So to me, that would have been 2 meetings each week.
Those were just meetings on hearings to get comments back on the grid map.
So
I didn't take into account
Tuesday.
I didn't take into account your business meetings.
Okay, thank you.
So if you wanted to run your business meeting in the morning and do that in the afternoon or the evening time, or reverse that, vice versa, that's what we're suggesting.
And Mark, you're suggesting September 20th, right?
Yes. No, 21st.
Yeah, but so starting that week though.
Yes.
So what you're suggesting is September 21st, which is a Tuesday, because I have to pull up my calendar to figure out.
Right.
Yes.
And then on Friday.
And then on Friday, but we would maybe have our business meeting in the morning on the 21st, and then the mapping piece in the afternoon. Is that what you're thinking? And then the 24th just for the public hearing piece to review those on the 24th. And then the next week, would it be, we'd have our regular meeting on the 28th and then the public piece on the 29th? Just, it would help if we had that clarified.
Yes, correct. So the week of the 20th, there'd be 2 meetings on the 22nd, or sorry, on the 21st and the 24th. The second week, we would have 1 meeting on the 29th, and the third week, we would have 2 meetings in there on the 5th and the 7th.
The 7th.
And if we needed to squeeze a second meeting into the second week, that we only talked about one on the 22nd, we could sneak one in there.
On the 29th, you mean, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yep, you're right.
And then that's on top of our regular meetings that we have.
Correct.
Correct, Chair? Yeah, okay.
This is Commissioner Meal. I thought we had talked about maybe not doing public meetings other than virtual meetings until we had a draft map. So are we going to get things back during this period, comments on the grid map that are really worth going out to the public, and then doing a third round, which I assume will be more intense once we have the draft maps?
I would think that we'd be getting a bunch of comments back on the grid map. This is going to be the first time that the public has seen any type of map product that they would have some comments on. Doug, you might want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That, you know, the grid is the grid. It's going to be a mess. I mean, by design, it's a mess. So this is really the opportunity where people will typically submit a whole bunch of maps. You know, really, technically modified versions of the grid, but all but starting from scratch and from the public's perspective in all likelihood. So yeah, I think you'll get a lot of radically different maps to consider in this time period. And I think what we're talking about is not doing a listening tour, but having meetings where the public can participate and share their thoughts without you traveling around the state at this point. But obviously having a way for residents from across the state to participate in these meetings.
It's also our first time to really collectively be starting to do the meat of the work, which I think will be substantive and I think very valuable.
So Mark and Doug Johnson, which I'm going to always say last name now. We basically, this is going to be the first opportunity for us to be seeing from the public their potential starting points of versions of the maps that they would like to see, right? They're going to take the grid map and they're going to change it up to the way they think it should look, correct? And you're talking about having these as virtual meetings, just like we're doing now, and then the public can provide input. Is that correct?
Yes, I don't know if there's a in-person component that will be able to be part of this versus virtual, but certainly a virtual element to this.
And then if those meetings go well and that's the schedule, then we would think that a public decision meeting would be the week of the 18th of October. And then going into the 25th, 26th, and 27th timeframe, if the extra days are needed.
So sorry, I was looking at the calendar. So would that be the 8th of October, did you say, Mark? That would be the conclusion of that?
18th.
Okay, so that's different from the.
Well, it would be the week
Correct.
of the 18th.
The
And
week
then
of the
possibly spilling over into the next week as well.
This is for the draft maps, correct? No?
Yes.
Okay, so we're basically transitioning from grid maps in the first week of October to draft maps after that, correct? I was looking at, I printed out your original schedule.
Yeah, the public input would be public input on the grid map, which will take the form of them proposing draft maps. So that week of October 18th and the probably a couple days in the following week, you'll be adopting your draft map. Yes.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to coordinate with what's on your calendar, with what we're talking about as clearly as possible. The grid map 23-day review you had from September 15th to October 8th. That's the revised version of what you gave us. That's what we're talking about with these meetings right now, correct? That grid map 23-day review and us looking at those options.
Yeah,
and that's correct.
Well, I had that through the October 7th, right?
I just have it from this is the schedule option 2.
Right. No, I got it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So in that schedule option 2, you've got the 23-day review, which is when the public is commenting on all this through October 7th or 8th, depending on which version you have. And then, as you just heard, we got 900 comments in the first listening tour. I would expect to get more than that this time around. So we need some time to process all of that, obviously, and prepare that for your decision meetings, which are then, as you know, like essentially we're putting what had been listed as draft maps development and draft maps public decision meeting, all that time together into one series of meetings.
So basically the next week we would start to meet more intensely, as Commissioner Meal has talked about, that we'll need to meet on a regular basis when we'd be actually then looking at developing our maps, right? So these are sort of the preliminary meetings to look at the public's views and what they're submitting. And then we had talked about having last time, I think, some pretty intense periods where we'd be meeting fairly often. And on your schedule, it talks about draft map development from 10:15 to basically around the 27th. So I'm just trying to put all of that together, because if we could have all of that at one time, that would be helpful for all of us, I think, to kind of go through from a scheduling perspective.
But I do think that these proposed additional dates of commission time to be working on the grid map, putting together the information that we've learned, applying it, that to me sounds right. When we talk about an additional meeting on the Tuesday to the business meeting, my sense of the commission is that particularly maybe the business at that time may be, small relative to the actual mapping work, that maybe we do both on those Tuesdays, from 8 a.m. onward. But this is also a logistical task for the staff to firm up these specific dates, get it all in the commissioners' calendars, the staff calendars, and block off the time.
And if you guys didn't want to do 2 meetings on a Tuesday, it would be possible to move that Tuesday meeting to probably a Monday, if need be.
Well, or what I'm getting at is my sense of my colleagues is they prefer like just a really long Tuesday. Like once we convene, let's just work with a break every hour and a half.
This is Commissioner Lerner again. This is fine. I do think we'll need to meet more often, and I'm very good with long Tuesdays and then adding in whatever we need. and getting it on our calendars as soon as possible. But I guess I still am asking for the clarification of the week after we had talked about, just again for calendaring mostly, so that we can have that and connecting to the schedule that we have from you. So after the week of October 5th through 7th, can you clarify for us the next meetings and whether we'd be again needing to increase the number of meetings per this 5B, and how that and what we would be covering in that next phase, that next round?
Sure. So if we stick to the grid map public meetings, with it ending on the 7th and the way that we've seen the data come in for the community of interest, we're going to have probably a big push towards the end of a lot more data coming in than the very beginning. So right after that, we're going to have to compile all that data for you and get that together. And it was probably 4 or 5 time increase than we were seeing in the days previous. Don't quote me on that number. That's just some quick math in my head. So right after that, we're going to probably need 3 or 4 days to finish compiling that data. And then starting sort of the 18th and bleeding into the 27th would be the time that we would actually be meeting probably almost daily to discuss the data that we compiled. And then in that time, talk about what the draft map development would look like. And Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's going to be bringing up, what the public's given us, what we put together for you, and then you guys are going to decide, well, we need to make a tweak here. We need to make a tweak here, and then we'll go back and make it for you and then present it to you. And that is my understanding. Doug, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think, the public's free to submit however they want and add whatever comments they want. In particular, as you decide which of those elements you want to incorporate, you'll need to tie them into, I want to make this change to the grid map because of this Prop 106 criterion. So we'll need to very carefully document those. But other than that, yeah, you're just taking that public input and seeing which pieces of it we can put together into a map that you like as your draft map eventually. But yes, there will be a lot of kind of incremental change in that very short time frame. Without doubt.
And Doug, that's a period where you've talked about the fact that we don't want to forget we're doing 2 maps, the legislative and congressional. You were suggesting in the past, you've seen commissions take one day and do legislative, the next day congressional, and while we're doing the next day, and then our mapping team behind the scenes is doing all the things we talked about the previous day on the other map and working our way through both maps in that period.
Correct.
But the goal being by the 27th to have a draft map of each one.
Exactly.
Yep.
And during that time, we'll be measuring it, like you said, against the different parts of the proposition, the Constitution, right? The 6 criteria. At some point, and this may or may not belong here, so correct me and stop me. Will we hear from you ways that we can measure things like compactness and contiguous, the measurements that we'll be using that will help us as we do those assessments on the mapping? And we can put that in a separate place if we need to, but that'll be part of what we'd be doing, right? Looking at the measures. Yes,
the legal team earlier gave a presentation on kind of all those criteria, but we can certainly return to that and revisit it as a refresher, because there's been a lot of material we covered in the last couple of months, and certainly those key things will be top of mind as you get into mapping. So we can certainly do a refresher on that for you.
And Doug Johnson, just for all of our edification here, how much change from the draft map to a final map do you see typically?
There's usually quite a bit. Just drawing on the last 2 commissions, there's usually quite a bit. The grid kind of releases people to then draw whatever they feel appropriate and best for the state. So you get stuff all across the board. Then the commission adopting a draft map really tends to focus that discussion, and you get much more kind of everyone kind of works from that one map and comes in with all kinds of changes to it. So it's likely to be quite a bit of change.
So we don't, at the end of the day on the draft map, we're not anywhere near done. So
Correct.
It's just important to get a draft map out there.
Yep.
A quality draft map out there.
Hopefully a draft map that we like. But
Yeah.
knowing there's still going to be a lot of input and quite a bit of change. So
yeah, I didn't follow the step-by-step 10 years ago that closely, but I do know 20 years ago, the adopted draft legislative map actually had a district referred to as the leftover district. It was just whatever else was left in the map, because of exactly the point you're making, Commissioner. Of the decision was, rather than try to fine-tune it for a day or two, get it back out to the public, let them react to it, and move on to the next stage, knowing that that district was not going to be there next time. If the only thing it had going was, yeah, the districts around it looked pretty good, and this was just the leftovers. So yes, you do reach a point of let's get back out there. In your case, on the final listening tour, and knowing that map's going to change. But hopefully we'll get there, and it'll look gorgeous, and only need minor changes. But that may or may not be the case.
Well, and to the extent that we do our best early on, all of that pays dividends. We will have a better product if we try to understand the information we're receiving now and incorporate it to the best of our ability each step of the way.
So the meetings in September and early October on the grid map, are these virtual meetings? And if they're virtual meetings, how do we queue up people to actually testify? How does that work?
I want to be careful that there are two separate conversations. One is the explicit mapping work that we as commissioners will do and convene with the mapping team and incorporate the data. The separate conversation, which we also need to have, is our strategy with collecting public testimony during that time. So one is the method of collecting the data. The other is how we manage and execute the data.
Yeah, so I'd like to hear comments on both those questions.
Yeah, I think, Brian or Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the actual format, interaction, layout of those meetings is still being figured out, in part because they need to know the dates that we're looking at in order to nail down those details. In terms of how the data will be gathered, hopefully folks will feel very comfortable with the online mapping tool. We'll actually draw maps using the online mapping tool. But because that certainly is, number one, gives them the most data and the most control to draw a precise, useful map that can be implemented most easily. But people can give verbal testimony, written testimony, send in whatever, they can print the maps that will be posted and available of the grid maps and draw on them. That obviously is the hardest to interpret and implement, but people can testify however they want. Mark, anything to add on that? Accurately?
No, I don't think so. I think you got the good gist of it. I think the key here is that there's going to be multiple avenues to participate in, and we're going to have to be ready to accept data in all those multiple avenues.
And we'll have a conversation, Commissioner Meal, when Director Schmidt reports. We'll talk about outreach, and we'll begin a conversation about the process method, the process question of how we're going to collect additional data from the public. So there will be time carved out in our agenda today to dive into that a little bit.
Obviously, if we were doing it all online, we wouldn't need to set dates. So I assume we're setting dates because we're going to set aside time for direct testimony of some type. And I was curious if we're thinking that's going to be virtual testimony. or if we're thinking we're going to actually have meetings in different locations again.
Is that a question for us?
Yes.
I know the commission doesn't want to do another road trip for another tour around the state, but there could be a central location somewhere that the commission is at that people could show up in person, but that's totally up to the commission to decide. I'm not deciding that for you, just providing feedback. And then there's also probably a virtual option. The logistics would have to be worked out on how to get people to be able to testify in a virtual setting. So I know there's a couple different options. You guys could do satellites again if you really wanted to, but just not the commissioners making the travel around the state. So I think there's a lot of options that as a commission, you guys are going to need to weigh in, how you feel that you should take in public testimony and move forward. I don't know if I have the right answer or solution for you, but those are sort of the three options. And I will say that, once the grid map gets adopted, we can publish a web map out there that people just want to view it without having to log in or create an account with the redistricting system. It'll just be out there, so people could view it. Doug, you got anything else? Or go ahead. Question?
No, just I think that's helpful, and then perhaps we can also, when Director Schmidt gives his report or talks about this, we can hear. I don't know exactly what the other commissioners did. Obviously, 20 years ago, they didn't have this virtual option like we do. 10 years, not as much either. So it would be interesting just to hear how they went about getting the feedback during that phase. And we can use that as part of our thought process in terms of making a decision.
Doug, you want to talk about IRC 20 years ago?
Yeah, it was actually interesting. 20 years ago, they received over 50 drawn GIS-based maps throughout the whole process from residents. 10 years ago, I think they only got about 10. So there's always been some capability for folks to draw and submit maps if they had the systems back then. Now, of course, as you mentioned, there will be a free online tool that anyone with internet access can use. So that's a big step up than having to buy the expensive software. But I think, people having the ability to appear in the past in person, this time either in person or virtually, and actually share their maps and show their maps and talk about their maps to you has always been a key part of the process.
So I think one thing to consider for a virtual option is if somebody wants to show you a map, how do they show you what they're trying to discuss? Do they share their screen with you? Do they show it in their camera? Those kind of things. And then how could you possibly intake that? So do you need to get a screen capture of it? Do they need to send it in? What does that look like? Maybe they don't have to do any of that. Maybe, that's just what we have to process. So those are some questions that you'd have on the technology side too.
Other questions? Mark and Doug, do you want to move on the agenda?
If there's no other questions, then yeah, I think we can move on. I think one of the next topics is training on the redistricting system. I know we've talked about it for the last 2 Tuesdays in a row. So there's a couple options out there for you. There is a 4-hour ESRI training that we could do. The ESRI training would be, as far as I'm aware, in a private setting for the commissioners. If we want to, and then Timmins would conduct training for the public via maybe YouTube videos or maybe something live here on the screen, but it'll probably be more YouTube videos. And then the second piece could be is if the commission wants to be trained in the public, in a public meeting, that Timmons would then provide you guys the live training in the public meeting. And I think those are really the two options that we have. I guess there is a third option if you wanted an 8-hour Esri private training, but I would highly steer you probably more towards the 4-hour. But there is the option of the 8-hour. And the goal would be is to provide training next Tuesday, if we can make a decision at the meeting today. And that's critical because we're processing the data, and that the time frame gets shorter and shorter as we get closer and closer to the grid map. And if you would like Esri to provide the training, that their calendar really tightens up, and it's pretty much either next week or early September, because they're doing a lot of other stuff for redistricting. So those are sort of the options that I put out for you. I don't know if there's questions from the commission, if you guys have a feel of what kind of training that you would like, but those are sort of the three options out there.
I'd like to understand better the differences of the training. So how does it differ if you train us versus Esri, and what does it look like?
So if Esri trains us, it would be a 4-hour session. They have somewhere between 8 and 10 modules that they would train you on. It would be live, hands-on in the system. But it would be more in a private setting. If we trained you,
meaning the 5 commissioners and our staff, alone with representatives of Esri?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
How could that happen? Wouldn't we still have to have a meeting called, wouldn't we, for us to be together?
It's not a recommended approach. Yeah.
I would pass that over to the legal team to answer that one.
Well, it is an approach, and it's definitely within the commissioner's wherewithal to make that decision. Let's just put that straight. However, it would be a specially noticed meeting for purposes of training only. Happens all the time with agencies that you need to get trained on Microsoft, Excel, etc. You're able to go in. You're not able to do any type of deliberative process. Not able to talk about how the maps would be drawn in this realm, and then you're basically getting software training just as if you were in orientation for a brand new job, and that's it. But it would still need to be a specially noticed meeting that would be closed. And for that sole purpose, but again, no deliberation and no discussion.
Okay, and then walk us through what the other 2 options look like.
Well, the third option would be the same Esri training, but it'd be for an 8-hour time frame instead of a 4-hour time frame.
So what you're proposing is for you to do the training with us in public.
That is the second option. That yes, Timmons could do the training in public, live with you guys, with public watching. Probably the most, I don't know, probably the best option in the sense. That way everybody has the exact same training that everybody's seen and up to date. I'd have to figure out a time frame. I would think that it'd be more of a 2 to 4 hour training. If Timmons would give it, and I could come up with more specifics down the road on that.
What's the difference between, because I think I know I blocked off next Tuesday because we had talked about that the last time, that maybe we would do it in the afternoon on that day. But what's the difference between a Timmons 2 to 4 hour training and an Esri 2 to 4 hour training, just in terms of who's doing it? Or, I mean, we want to have the same skill set when we're done, whichever way we do the training.
I think the difference would be is that, on the Timmons side, we'd have to go develop some slides. We'd have to go develop some, maybe exercises for you guys to do or to show you how to walk through it. So I would say that if we were to do it for Timmins, I don't know if we'd be 100% ready for next Tuesday afternoon, because we're going to have some work to do.
And the flip side, correct me if I'm wrong, but Esri won't do it in public as a company legal policy. So that's the big difference.
Yeah.
And just to give you a little bit of context too, the city of Sacramento is using the Esri tool as well, and they have videos on their website of how to do it. And the total video, it's broken up in 5 pieces, but it totals about 35 minutes. So when we talk about a 2 to 4 hour training, it's a pretty in-depth, detailed review of all the, in part because you're going to be using the analytical tools, I suspect, more than a city would need to. But you're getting a very in-depth exposure to everything that the tool can do.
This is just a very practical question. Executive Director Schmidt, are our current state issued laptops sufficient to be doing this mapping work?
We do have new ones that should be ready for you all in the next week or so. They're imaging them, and then we'll exchange them so that you'll have those for the mapping process.
I mean, if we're learning on one tool and then switching, I don't know if there's a way for us to have,
Sure.
the computer that we're going to use and be trained on it.
Yeah. Let me double back with IT, and I will let you all know.
Well, just to be certain here, it's all web-based in a browser. So as long as your computer can run a browser sufficiently, I don't think you're going to have an issue.
Okay.
And well, I was going to say you might want to have Excel on it or an equivalent of Excel on it. But there's also a PDF version of it too. So
I guess I'd like to just get a feel for what the best suggestion is. We've been talking about this training now for several weeks. And personally, if we're going to start to get information from the public soon, I'd like to be able to start looking at it and know what I'm looking at as part of it. So what is the recommendation that you all have that we could do? I'm fine with any of the options, not the 8-hour option. I will say I do not. But
I'll give you a thumbs up for that.
Yeah, I will for sure. I would take the 2 to 4 hour option. Either is a special training, noticed one where and in some ways, a special training like that might leave us open to having lots more questions about the training versus in public, but I don't know that matters. I think we can ask the same questions no matter where we are. If we do it in public, the public then is getting trained at the same time. And those videos go up online so they can always go back and watch it. So there's certainly an advantage to the public piece of training because they're also waiting to get the YouTube videos from you of how to do this. So this might take care of both of those at one time. So for me, it doesn't matter to me which one other than no 8 hours.
It's been my experience is that the software companies that develop the tools usually have the best trainers. Am I right on that?
Let's just say training is not Esri's specialty. So yes, they are good at it, but I don't think you're going to lose much.
I would say their trainers are definitely good. And they do build the software. So, yeah, they might have the most. I'll leave it at that.
What I'm hearing is that it's not rocket science, that maybe we'll be able to, learn it along with the public, and maybe we don't necessarily need it. The ability to teach us that 2 to 4 hours is the sweet spot. If you're not ready for Tuesday, I don't, it sounds like the commissioners are ready to be trained and ready to go. So as soon as you're ready, and I don't want to cut off dialogue. If there's further debate and discussion about the method, please.
This is Commissioner Meal. If we're going to meet in person, next week works much better for me than the following week. Any day next week. But if we're going to do this by Zoom anyway, then it doesn't matter at all to me.
It's virtual, correct?
Both options would be virtual.
Okay.
I think the biggest difference between just the person doing the training, it would be is if you wanted training next Tuesday in the afternoon, it would be Esri. Timmons would not be ready that soon to provide you guys training because we'd have to actually develop the training. So just put that out there. It would probably be 1 week after that if Timmons were to conduct the training.
So Mark, my question is, has Timmons done this kind of training before? Because what we don't want, and I have full confidence in you, nothing against that, just clarifying, but I don't want to have us, you develop a training and then we start asking questions and you're like, oh, we didn't actually, we don't have that in our toolbox, so to speak. So I just want to be sure that you feel confident that whatever the training is that you will develop will be as comprehensive as Esri's, in the sense that you'll have those, you never know what we're going to ask the questions. Do you understand what I'm asking?
No, I totally understand what you're asking. Timmons, we've done GIS training in the past, not specifically on the redistricting system. So that would be something that we would need to go develop. So I would say for trainings for GIS, just in general purposes, yes, we've definitely done that. But there would be some steps and some development for a course on the redistricting system itself that Timmons would have to put together.
And I would add to that too, just we can never say never. There's a very good chance that you could come up with a question in an Esri-led session where the Esri trainer would have to say, I'll have to go get that answer. So it certainly is a possibility that, if you're asking really advanced questions, we might have to go find out, regardless of who's leading the training.
Well, it sounds like to me, we set aside the 24th for this training, and the time, energy, and expense to go develop for Timmons to go develop a class for us. I don't have time on the 31st, take an actual 4 hours. So I sort of in favor of using the vendor and Esri doing the training on the 24th.
I'm good with that. I'm good with about anything. So
yeah. So help us understand the downside of working directly with Esri in a private setting. There's obviously it's not a challenge. We need to disclose to the public, as council mentioned, that we will convene as a group in this unique way. The public is excluded. Go ahead, Brett, please.
Right, and just to the extent before mapping consultants were to respond to that, to the extent that goes into litigation or legal experience, make sure if the recommendation is to go into executive session to get some litigation or legal advice, we're happy to do so.
Okay.
And then the other piece that would have to happen is that concurrently, because we've been promising the public a training of some kind, there would still have to be something published, whether it's through 35 minutes total of YouTube videos, like you were mentioning, Doug Johnson, or whatever it would be. We still need to provide, either way, the public with some form of training and access, correct?
Correct.
Right. Yeah, we'd be doing this in a special session for just the commissioners and then doing a separate training program of some kind for the public.
And Commissioner Lerner, my understanding from Mark is that these YouTube videos are already out there in the domain, and it's we could easily get those linked up to a public link on our website. Is that right, Mark?
Esri has some YouTube videos that are already out there. Just in the public domain already in YouTube, but we would create you guys something something a little more tailored, I think, for Arizona. But there are YouTube videos out there.
Right. And that presentation you're talking about, Mark, could also be done via video, and then at the PowerPoint presentation. I've did enough of these computer trainings where there's a bunch of cartoons and make it very, very simple. We can put that on our the commission website, and people from now until December can go look at that and get a refresher. In addition, they can also contact staff for questions about how to use the software, correct?
Yes. You're saying you're talking about the Esri PowerPoint slides being saved on the commission's website.
Or giving links to them, yes.
Okay. Are you talking about putting that on the public side or the private side?
The public side, and then in addition, whatever training Timmons wants to give up to make it Arizona specific, you can do that in video, with that also on the commission website about how to, like a step-by-step how to use the software, correct?
Yeah, anything that Timmons produces, we can, for training purposes, yeah, on the redistricting software, we can put on the website. On the slide thing, I'll have to find out for you. I'm not 100% sure on Esri generated slides.
No problem.
So Mark, then, and I'm fine with whatever. I mean, I also have next Tuesday set aside, and I'm fine with any of the trainings. But are the training that you would do for the public, would it be the same training you would then otherwise be developing for us if you were going to do it, or it would be just a modified version of that?
I think the training would be probably modify a little bit in that it would be a little shorter of YouTube videos in a digestible clip than just like a 1-2 hour giant YouTube video and fast forward to find your spot. So I would envision it would be a series of YouTube videos that would have a specific topic that we're talking about, and it would take you through that topic from start to scratch. Like the easiest one to describe would be, how do you create an account? How do you log into the system? You know, that would be one YouTube video that could be, you know, probably 5 minutes long. Another one could be how to use a specific tool set. Another one could be exactly how do you submit a proposed map, or how do you comment on them? That's how I would envision the training to go, in very specific, tailored YouTube videos instead of just a giant long one. Because generally when you're searching for help, right, you want help on the topic that you want. You don't want to pull up, here's my giant help dialogue, and I need to just sort of hunt through there to find the answer that I need.
Mark and Doug, let me ask you a very practical question. You know, the conversation shifted when we spoke about our calendars and our availability next Tuesday and the Tuesday after that. It sounds like the commissioners really set aside a chunk of time next Tuesday. Is there any way that you would be ready to conduct the training next Tuesday, even if it was in the afternoon, or is that not an option?
I don't think that is an option.
Okay.
I don't think we would be 100% ready for that.
I think that there's a lot of open minds amongst the commissioners, which means that I'm not sure that there's, you know, an ideal choice or one that's, you know, bad. Thoughts?
My thoughts are sort of that one training doesn't make an expert, and I think we need to get started. So I'm in favor of continuing to hold the schedule we had set a couple weeks ago for next Tuesday.
And what you're saying is that that doesn't preclude Timmons from doing an additional training, maybe for the public, or, you know, ensuring that basic training's available for everybody to participate, whether it's YouTube or, you know, these different options.
Right.
Commissioners Lerner and Meal, how do you feel about this?
That would be fine with me.
I'm fine with whenever with either approach. And if Commissioner York has next week, and that's the best day for him, I'm happy to do that as well.
Okay, it sounds like based on just, practicality schedules, the commissioners would like to move forward with training next week. If it's private with ESRI, we'll have to rely on our counsel with how to alert the public to that and, obviously ensure that no business is done. And then after that, we can, discuss what kind of general public training we want to provide.
Well, Chair Newberg, in the meantime, I assume Timmons can start to do some work on posting some YouTube, getting that compilation together. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll work on getting some videos together. And we can definitely grab the videos that Esri already has posted publicly online.
Okay, I believe, is this an administrative decision or do we need a formal motion?
Madam Chair, we do not need a formal motion.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further discussion, feel free to move on.
Okay. I know there's a couple topics on data between grid and draft maps and understanding public comment and map submission during various map termination phases. I think our conversation before training might have bled into those topics. Are there any questions specific on those topics that we have not answered?
Well, Mark, I think we talked about the fact that we'll be receiving a lot of data. I guess my question all along has been, how do we as commissioners process that data, assess that information? I know you're going to be doing a lot of compilation, but me as a commissioner, I'm responsible for kind of looking at what the public is submitting and doing some evaluation, and then and that's, I guess, where my big question has been all along is, how do I do that? We'll be getting a lot of maps, but then I'm not sure if my question fits with this actually when it says how to obtain data. For me, it's a matter of how am I assessing that data? How am I assessing those maps?
And I think that just goes into understanding the public comments and any type of data that we would get or submissions that we would get during the different phases. Doug, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think we've been working with Timmons they've got some handy tools that I think will generate some very nice focus maps out of those 900 community of interest submissions we have, so that we'll be able to say, in this region here, we got this many community of interest maps. They all included this part. Half of them added in this part as part of that community. And 10% of them went this far as being part of that community. So that will make the 900 still a bit overwhelming. It's a good problem to have that we got so much public input, but will help focus on where was the community focused on it. And then you'll be getting these maps in. They'll hopefully all come in with comments explaining what their purpose and focus was. And you'll have to look at them and see which ones persuade you that those are proposed changes to the grid that you agree with. So it will be a lot of material to go through without a doubt, and then just using your discretion about which ones best meet the goals of the constitutional criteria and the public input that you've received related to that. So it will be a lot of data. There's no just quick, flip through yes, no, like the eye doctor. Is this better? Is this better? There's no tool that does that simply. It's more kind of just having to go through a lot of material, understanding what you feel is, as a commissioner, what you feel is important to implement and less important, and then seeing which of those changes you can put. The part where we as your mapping consultants really come in is helping you understand, can I put this goal for Pinal County together with this goal for Gila County, you know, and as you try to blend those different regional pieces into a map, what works and what conflicts. But it is a lot of material to go through, without a doubt.
And just as a follow-up, we're using the 900 as a number of what was submitted, but then we also have all the individual comments from our public hearings and the paper submissions, which I assume are in addition to those 900. Is that correct? So all of that will be in one big basket, correct?
Yeah, so the 910 is just the digital surveys that people submitted online. And then we got paper-based surveys that people filled out during the actual listening tour in person that they submitted back to staff. We are working on transcribing that into a big Excel table. And then we have received one batch of comments from the public comment sphere that was sent to me from IRC, and we're processing that and putting that into the Excel table. And then we have the notes from the public sessions. So those are really the three data pieces that we have, that we are processing, that we will give to you back to make decisions.
And I don't know, Commissioner Lerner, if you're asking about the format through which that information will be shared with us. I mean, you know, when we look at that graph of the maps that were submitted and you see all those dark lines, I mean, you know, to me, it's like a big mud pie. And I wonder the language, you know, that's going to be used for us to interpret the data. I don't know if that, Commissioner Lerner, is what you're asking, but at least that's also on my mind.
No, that's a great follow-up. Thank you, Chair Newberg.
So let me ask, what do you mean by the language?
So there's just an enormous amount of data, and you say an Excel sheet. Well, what data is on that Excel sheet, and will it be intuitive? Will we know how to understand that data that you're trying to communicate to us? Because there's so many different ways to understand data. I don't know if I'm being clear.
And on the digital data, where they actually submitted us a geography, you know, that provides two different types of data pieces that the commission could take in. One being a GIS data set, there's the actual tabular data about all the attributes of what people actually typed into the fields, like you'd see in a normal spreadsheet. But then they also have the GIS data that could be map-based, that could, you know, start to talk about exactly where, you know, Doug was mentioning the overlaps, and, you know, here's 100%, here's 50% agreement, here's 10% agreement. Those are, you know, the products that we can give you in the back end for two different ways of digesting it, a visual and a tabular data set.
And maybe a narrative, you know, so maybe there's, you know, the empirical data, there's a narrative about ways of collecting or interpreting the data, there's visuals, you know, people interpret the data differently. And anyway.
Yeah, let me show you one thing. This is from a paper, but it's using the script I was talking about. Let me just very briefly show this if I can. Yeah. So the top map that you see here, this is from a paper on the Santa Barbara city districting effort. The top map is community of interest maps, kind of like the 910 that we have, of people drawing downtown Santa Barbara and kind of the heart of the city of Santa Barbara. And what the script does is it gives you the map below, where you can see the dark brown. Almost everyone included it. You know, 60% or more of people included that area. The slightly lighter brown is, you know, 50 to over half the people included that. So it takes that big blob of lines and makes it into a much more understandable point. And then there's the little X's on there for the center points of each person's chart. So that's one way that we can take that data and make it, you know, we group it into, for example, in this case, who drew State Street in downtown Santa Barbara? We group all those and give you something much easier to follow that way. Narrative is kind of by nature has to be extremely limited, because that's us imposing our interpretation and our beliefs on it. But we can certainly kind of give you descriptive groupings like that.
You just gave a narrative, and that was wonderful. That's the level of narrative that I'm speaking about.
Okay.
And we'll also be receiving all the raw data, right? You'll be giving us, here's all the information submitted. Now here's what we've done with it, right? That way, if we wanted to go back, I don't know that I would, because I have a feeling it's going to be overwhelming, but you never know.
Mm-hmm.
We could always go back to the raw data and say, oh, well, we got, 50 submissions or something, right? We'll also see that same data set that you're using to create those compilations. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. You'll get the raw data back too. And Brian can build you a bunch of stuff.
And in particular, if you recall a particularly persuasive comment that was made during the first listening tour, obviously you can go back, pull that person's map or written comments or whatever they submitted and refer to that. Sorry.
And just thinking, and then I'll stop. I'm sorry. I've already warned you about my data nerdness. So, but just as another quick question, then, at one of our meetings, Eppin Sholo, I think it was, we had a lot of people supporting one particular map. So how does it happen when we get a lot of duplicates? For example, if we have, 30 people who are all submitting the same map, how do we distinguish between that, which was maybe a sort of a group effort? We're all going to pile on our view, this, group, versus 2 or 3 folks who might have another. How do you distinguish from that? And I'm using Sholo because it was interesting how many people had come together as a community and said, we like this particular map.
So just so I understand, let me read it back to you just to make sure. Are you talking about 30 different people that submitted basically the same map in the community of interest survey online, or are you talking about people that stood up and said, I agree with what the person said before me?
The latter, and I'm using 30 as a made-up number. I don't remember how many it was. But it was just several people spoke. But I guess I'm saying in the big picture, and we've seen that before, where we see duplicate comments in our web comments where people are citing the same kinds of things. That's what I guess I'm asking, is how do we distinguish among that as we are looking at understanding the public comments and the web submission, map submissions and all?
I think that's actually a really good question. Trying to think about that off the back of my head. Wasn't prepared to answer that one.
Yeah, let me jump in a little, Mark, because this comes up a lot with all the comments. But so people should not feel any need to submit a copy of someone else's comments. It's perfectly fine for them to say, I agree with the map that Joe submitted. They don't need to copy and resubmit Joe's map. That's just flooding the system with noise. And as you noted, it's fine to just sign on to the one map or email in saying, I agree with the map that so-and-so sent in. And ultimately, how much weight do you give to that as a commissioner is up to you. We don't want this to become an AstroTurf effort of who can generate the most people who send in, copy and paste the most emails. We want this to be more of a, who can come up with the best map challenge. It may be that the best map you end up in and you end up adopting, only one person sends in, but it best meets your goals, the public's goals, and the goals of the constitutional criteria. So this is not the commission's going to choose the map that has 10,000 people sending in an email to endorse it. As you've been through, that kind of copy and paste campaign can actually turn people off. But yes, if there are, all the people of one development want to be kept together and there's a map of their development, they should just sign on to one. They don't need to each send in a copy of the same thing.
And would we then get a note that 30 people said that they like this map?
Yes, similar to what you get with the public comments submitted. In all likelihood, they would do it through your public comment form. So you get it in that format, just as you have with all the public comments coming in. So you'll get not just how many, but you'll actually see who it is, the names of the people sending it in.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Lerner, I mean, I see all of these specific questions as the commissioners are all excited to get our hands on the data and are really kind of mentally trying to wrap our hands around, you know, interpreting the data and doing our job. So, you know, I know, Doug, you've done this before and we haven't. And so thank you for indulging us with the questions to help us, you know, just make it more real.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a struggle when we're talking about it theoretically. I think once you start getting maps in, then it'll all become very concrete very fast.
Then we'll have lots more questions.
Okay, I think you still have additional items if you want to move forward. If there are no other questions from my commissioners on map submission and public comment.
Doug, would you like to introduce the polarization expert?
Oh, yes. So a piece of very good news, given the importance of this effort and the time crunch that we're all operating under in this post-COVID census year. I reached out to Dr. Lisa Hanley, who's a very highly respected and well-known and widely published expert in polarized voting analysis. It's late in the cycle, so it was a bit of just winging a prayer, but it turns out she is willing to help out. So we've worked with your staff, and we're bringing her on as just another member of the NDC team with the Timmons Group to help you out. If the name sounds familiar, she was the polarized voting expert for the 2001 Commission. And notably, in all the litigation and the contentiousness around that, both sides of the litigation throughout the 2001 Commission's work relied and endorsed her work. It may have been the only uncontested part of the 2001 or the 2011 commissions. But she has published numerous books. She has a firm called Frontier Consulting. And the best part is not only is she an expert in the field, she has worked on Arizona before. So she understands the quirks of, the multi-member corporation commission elections and the multi-member state house elections and the complexities of that. And she also understands the regional demographics of the state. So as I told staff, I don't envision this having a budget impact. She's so good that actually she charges more per hour than I do, but she's much faster than I am. So I think in the net, it'll at least be a wash. And I'm very happy to have her on board. And we're already working with her on getting all the scripts in place so that once we have the data, we can run that as fast as we can. So given the very short time we're going to have to get all this done, happy to bring her on board and want to let everybody know that Dr. Hanley is with us.
This is Commissioner Meal. Doug, could you refresh us and the public as to what is a polarized voting analyst and what do we learn from that?
Oh, sure. Good question. So, and I will send her resume out as well so that you just know who she is. But so the polarized voting study is part of your Voting Rights Act analysis. So this is the look at how large does a protected class population need to be in order to have the opportunity to elect their preferred candidates. So if you recall the references to Section 2 of the Federal Voting Rights Act, this is the analysis that much of the drawing of districts to comply with Section 2 is based upon. So, and what we do is we look at past elections where there may have been a split between the protected class voters and non-protected class voters over who they preferred, and to see in which districts, how high were the protected class percentages in the districts where they won, how high were they in the districts where they lost, how much crossover voting was there in each case in order to determine what is that target effective or compliance level. I will defer to legal if they have any concerns with how I summarize that.
No, nothing from our end.
Doug Johnson, is this, will she be working with legal on these kinds of questions and issues?
Of course, the report that we put together will be reviewed by legal as part of our report there. So yes, in that respect. We are bringing her on as part of the NDC team, not as part of the legal team.
So Doug, when if we're looking at trying to compare 2, 3, 4, 5 maps that were all in the vicinity of things we're considering, will this end up comparing those maps as to how they how the polarized voting expert thinks they would comply with Section 2?
Yes, I think the answer to that would be yes. There would be a level of yes, this is sufficiently, if it's a Voting Rights Act sensitive area, we could confirm yes that we believe this meets the level necessary to be an effective district for that protected class.
This item does touch upon agenda item number 8, which is update discussion and potential action regarding Voting Rights Act consultants. This is what Doug Johnson is getting at, is identifying a data point through which we analyze it as it relates to the Voting Rights Act. So this is collecting relevant, essential data for us to uphold our responsibility to observe the VRA. And we will discuss Voting Rights Act experts coming up shortly.
So I think the key thing is we have an Arizona expert coming on, and we don't anticipate a budget impact from this.
Sounds fantastic.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else from my colleagues on agenda item number 5 from our mapping team? They're going to come back, I believe, in agenda item number 7 with census data, but for now, the substance of this. Okay. Thank you very much, Mark, Doug. And with that, we will move to agenda item number 6, Executive Director's Report and discussion thereof. I turn it over to Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I would like to have Alex Pena, who just joined us really yesterday. He was in Tucson, but his first full day in the office was yesterday. Introduce himself. He's one of our new community outreach coordinators. So Alex, if you'd introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex, and I'm very honored to be joining the team. So if you guys need anything at all, please do not hesitate to reach out to me.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Next, Marie from the outreach team is going to talk kind of broadly about the plan we're putting together that we should have finalized for you all next week. So Marie.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I was fortunate to be at the last meeting that you held in person in Mesa and talked to a number of people who were attending. And so that helped me understand what they needed to, participate in the meetings. I also read through most, if not all, of the public comments about, the meetings and the process that people wanted to be involved in. And so it came down to 3 basic categories: notification, preparation, and participation. People wanted earlier and broader notification. That's one of the things Alex will be working on. They wanted to understand how they prepare for the meeting, everything from the format of the meeting to the goal of the meeting, and then background information on how they can prepare themselves, such as the YouTube videos you were talking about. And then they wanted to know the ways they can participate. Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be through a portal? Some people weren't so comfortable with using technology. They even struggle with the QR code that we gave them. So the various ways that they could participate, and as many as possible, seem to be what they would be comfortable with. So we want to use these broad categories to formulate our outreach approach. And then we hope by organizing information under these categories, that'll help people figure out ways they can participate. Your mics are off. I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I was muted. Thank you, Marie. So we're working to finalize that plan, and I should have it for you all next week while we continue adding to our outreach efforts. I know moving forward, we're going to make sure that cities, towns, counties, once we have that communities of interest report, that they receive it and we give them the opportunity to comment as well. So we're going to continue adding throughout the process. Next up.
Wait, Director Schmidt and Marie, and maybe perhaps Michelle, how does this connect with the public information plan, and where does all of that fit together in terms of getting information out? So that sounded great, Marie, thank you. But where does that also fit with some of the other comments that we heard from people saying, how did we even find out about these meetings? I would assume that's the public. Well, I don't know how these connect, I guess. That's my question.
Well, that would be the notification part that I think Michelle could speak better to.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Lerner, I do believe that together with the two new outreach individuals, will be approaching various media opportunities such as social media, and in addition to sending out releases and getting communication out, we're in the process of looking at how we can make our website a little bit more user-friendly, recreating and redesigning our website. And in addition to that, implementing our various forms of social media within our website. We know that just attending a lot of the recent listening sessions, you know, there were a lot of people who are not comfortable with modern technology, and so they preferred to utilize, you know, the submittal of old-fashioned paper forms and everything else. So we'll be looking at and working hand in hand with Alex and Marie, and how to better address the communication pieces and getting information out to the state of Arizona. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there were comments. There've been a number of comments about how things are. I just was wondering how you all were connecting together, so that helped with how the team is going to work. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair, this is Vice Chair Watchman. My apologies for being late. I had some challenges to connect here, but did I add to the questions that Commissioner Lerner is putting on the table?
Please, welcome.
Okay,
Please.
yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I too did hear a lot of feedback during our hearings about certain community sectors that maybe were not informed or we didn't reach out to. And so my thought is similar to what Shireen is saying, is it possible to target the community groups that maybe were not present? And so, like for example, for me, I think we only heard, there's 22 or 23 tribes in Arizona. We only heard from 3 tribal leaders. I would really like the opportunity to hear from the other tribal leaders, if possible. And so I know that there's an organization called the Intertribal Council of Arizona, and they can help facilitate that. But then I also heard that some folks from the Black community, the Asian community, we only heard a couple minutes, and so I would really like to hear, at least from, well, I'd like to hear from more members of those respective communities on what they think their communities of interest are. You know, since we're at that point where we're trying to receive feedback, and yes, you know, the public and other areas of our state provided great testimony, great information, you know, good data for us to use in our work. But I think we have a few holes, and that's from the tribal community, the Latino community, the Black community, and so forth. And so I don't know if there's a way to do it. Yes, you know, we can't, you know, to me, it would seem that they need to be provide notice that yes, we're willing and if possible, we'll sit and listen to you. And so the new way of communicating is challenging, especially in rural parts of Arizona, and in some cases, you know, the communities where perhaps the incomes and levels are not as high. It's sometimes, you know, I think in this state, internet is still a luxury. You know, I know, you know, on reservations, internet is still a luxury. You know, it's not commonplace. So, but you know, I appreciate Commissioner Lerner raising the issue, and you know, I think we have a little time before we start generating the reports and as we get to the grids. And I would really like to hear from those community sectors that we didn't hear from during the listening to. So I'll stop there, but those are my thoughts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, we are going to continue making sure we try to include and encourage as many different community members to participate as possible. Michelle's working on, or sorry, not Michelle, Marie is working on a list of organizations, and we're going to make sure that we touch base with all of them and really try and activate them and get them involved in the process. Because it is a complicated process, and we don't want people to get involved in the end when they're mad because the process in the beginning was so complicated. So we want them to know what the process is early on and know that they can and should participate.
And Director Schmidt, just to clarify now, I think we kind of, and actually Chair Newberg, maybe you can, to make sure that I'm on this, I think we were talking now about item C in your report, because we did the introductions and then I think we moved into that plan. Is that correct, just for clarification?
Yes.
And so maybe when we get to item D, we can talk more about some of those specific groups and all that you're thinking of. I just want to clarify where we are. I think we jumped in because we introduced Alex and.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to suggest now that, you know, the listening tour is done, the staff has had an opportunity just to, you know, regroup and catch up. Maybe next week to come back with an overall strategy of how we approach the next month or two with collecting feedback from the public. That there are gaps, you know, that my fellow commissioners identified in our information collecting. I would say Maricopa County, as I alluded to earlier, is a significant gap. There are different ways through which we can collect data, and we want to be efficient and effective to collect the most meaningful data efficiently, whether that means maybe adding a few public hearings if necessary, whether it's identifying those specific groups that we have not heard from where we initiate or receive invitations to have dialogue. But I think this does warrant a comprehensive strategy that's coordinated to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to redistrict for the entire state. And there's questions of return on investment that, to be honest, I think the staff has unique information knowing, you know, what it requires to have a public hearing. The amount of data we hear and, you know, being strategic. But I think it's a collective sense from my colleagues and myself that we want to be deliberate as we move forward with hearing from all communities of interest in the state.
Absolutely. And we do want to make sure we're including everyone who may not have participated or find those holes. And we'll come back next week with a more comprehensive plan that really integrates the two. We're still processing the data. So we probably need another week, but we're going to continue reaching out where we can. We're not going to waste another week. So.
Okay, if you need 2 weeks, that's okay. I mean, we want quality. We want, I think what we're basically articulating is just a general desire of a plan, but we want to be sensitive to, what's on our staff members' plates.
Absolutely. Yep, we will work on that and come back to you all. And then on item D, that was just we're still trying to nail down a couple of the speakers for the 5Cs meeting, trying to coordinate everyone's schedules. So once we have that, it should be in the next 3 weeks are kind of the dates that might work out. So we'll keep you apprised of that. But if there are any other, I didn't know if Commissioner Lerner wanted to talk about specific groups or.
I guess I want to clarify where we are. I think we kind of got on the agenda. I'm a little. I actually started creating a list of organizations, and I could easily just send those to Marie and to you that have either sent us in through public comments and said we'd like an opportunity to speak. In my mind, what I had been thinking, which goes with your plan, and I'll certainly send these ideas, was that we could set some time at our meetings over the next few weeks where we maybe have some of these folks come in once there's a plan and we agree on who, and do a 5-minute presentation of their perspective, just as they would do if they'd been at public hearings. But we've heard from some folks saying we felt that we didn't have an opportunity. So maybe all of the commissioners could send some ideas to you of who are what organizations, and I'm thinking nonpartisan organizations might we want to invite or hear from in some way, whatever the decision is. So when I looked at the agenda item D, that's what I was thinking was the potentials, not only on those categories, but on other areas of communities of interest of some of the groups that have, Commissioner Watchman mentioned ITCA. I think there was LULAC that had written something. There's a few out there. So perhaps if that would work, Chair Newberg, we could send those directly to the staff, our suggestions, so that they could look at that as they're developing their plan.
Yes, I'd like to add a comment to that. I think we need, and part of why I've asked staff to come to us with a strategic plan, I believe that we as commissioners would need to set parameters such that it's, objective and fair to the entire state. So once you open up that opportunity, it's incumbent upon us to define what the criteria are for those who would rise to the level of speaking to us. So I'd like a thoughtful conversation, a strategic conversation about the different buckets through which we can learn and the relative pros and cons to each, and then try to have a thoughtful conversation about making it equitable to all communities of interest in our state. So I think it all fits together.
And this is Commissioner Meal. I just to remind all of us, a lot of groups claim to be nonpartisan that are extremely partisan. And so I think we need to be very cautious in this area.
Right.
So if any of the commissioners would like to send a list of groups or organizations they're thinking that we should make sure we reach out to or potentially have as speakers, please send them to Marie and I. I know Marie's been proactively putting together a list of organizations she thinks. So we'll come back with a more comprehensive plan for you all.
Great. I think it's a wonderful thing that the commission is hungry for, just learning about everybody in our state. And it's a good thing. And we'll take a break. We're close to the end, but I am cognizant of the time. Is there anything else on this agenda item number 6 before we take a quick break and reconvene for the last few items?
I don't have anything else for you today, Madam Chair.
Director Schmidt, I don't know that you covered A or B.
So A, the budget, we're still working with CSB, Central Services Bureau, to get some final numbers so we can present those to you all. So I should have those next week in anticipation of our budget submission September 1st. And then I touched briefly on the local electeds when I was talking about making sure that they're involved and receive the communities of interest report and are able to respond to it or add additional comments.
Any other questions for Director Schmidt? Okay, let's take a brief break and we'll reconvene at maybe 9:45 if everybody can be ready. Okay, we'll see you very soon. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I think I see all commissioners and our staff. So with that, let's dive right back into our agenda. We just finished with agenda item number 6, our executive director's report. With that, we will move to agenda item number 7, update, discussion, and potential action regarding the release of census data, integration of competitive measures, creation of grid map, and impact on established schedule. And we will turn it back over to Mark and Doug.
So Esri is currently processing the census data. They were able to pick that up last week when it was released. As of right now, we don't see any delays in getting the data or getting the grid map up. So as of right now, I don't see any impact to the schedule. I know there was a question that the data came out 4 days earlier. I don't see that impacting our schedule or getting the data 4 days earlier processed from Esri and into our system. So yes, the 4 days were nice, but it's not helping us right this second.
Any sense of the data? I've heard a little bit of buzz that maybe there are some bugs in the data. Just in terms of your touching, feeling the data, you know, any sense that you want to share? Because we're all just anxiously awaiting your feedback.
Esri and I have been going back and forth on you know, whether whether there's any issues with the census data or not. As of right now, I don't see anything going forward that's going to affect our time frame. But I did ask them to make me aware as soon as possible if they do find anything.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that is not drawn from the latest data release, but keeping in mind the big picture that we know from the apportionment numbers that came out months ago is that the fact that the state was well short of where we thought it was going to be means at least most of the localities will also come out well short of where they had expected to be. So we are expecting to see that data, but we are not at the point where we've seen anything yet.
So we just need to be patient along with the public to wait until we have a way to interpret the data, and we're excited.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else on that? Competitive measures, grid map, anything?
No, because we need the data first.
Okay.
But we were working on it.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to agenda item number 8, update, discussion, and potential action regarding retention of voting rights Act consultants. And I will turn it over to our legal counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to update the Commission, the legal team is in the process of retaining consulting experts that will assist the legal team in providing advice, during the map making process. These are individuals who are nationally recognized experts in the Voting Rights Act and other constitutional principles that apply to redistricting. I think we'll be in a position where next week we can tell you who they are, have a CV ready for your review. We're still in the process of retaining them, but we wanted to inform the Commission now that we're almost to that point, and obviously open up to any questions you may have.
Roy, do you mind just reminding us and the public what role these experts will play in the process, and as it relates to our responsibility to adhere to the VRA?
Yeah, so these will be experts that will serve as consultants to the legal team. So the purpose of their role is to advise us as your counsel, as we are providing advice to the Commission in determining whether the various maps that the Commission is considering are legally compliant with the Voting Rights Act and other constitutional principles, like the 14th Amendment, for example, of the U.S. Constitution. So that is their role. As you mentioned earlier, and I think in the earlier agenda item with Timmons related to racial polarization, as you well put, Madam Chair, is a data point that particular expert and Doug Johnson are going to consider. These experts that we're discussing as consultants to the legal team, I think we'll be looking at all aspects of the Voting Rights Act in a more holistic fashion and to provide us with their expertise and consulting advice related to, again, the compliance that the maps will have with the Voting Rights Act and other legal principles. So that will be their role. And as I said, I think we'll be ready to discuss who they are next week.
Excellent. We look forward to, welcoming them to our team.
Madam Chair, this is Vice Chair Watchman.
Please.
I think Roy is going to know, my question, but make sure we include experts on the Indian or Native American aspect of the Voter Rights Act, because there's a whole body of Indian law which I would assume includes the Voter Rights Act. And kind of stemming off of your presentation that you did to us a couple of weeks ago, I guess make sure we include that component too. I'm sure you are.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yeah, I can assure you that the consultants we're considering are consultants that have a great deal of experience in the Voting Rights Act overall, but certainly as it applies to Native Americans as a community of interest and as a population, a voting population in the United States.
Thank you.
Anything else on this agenda item? Thank you, Council, for your due diligence in securing these types of expert witnesses. With that, we'll move to agenda item number 9, discussion of future agenda item requests. I know we did ask our staff to come back with an overall strategic plan regarding outreach and additional potential public testimony. In addition to that, any other topics? Okay. With that, agenda item number 10, announcements. I have no specific announcements. With that, we'll move to agenda item number 11, next meeting date. We are planning to convene again next Tuesday, 8 a.m. on August 24th. A reminder, we will be taking a break Tuesday, the 7th. So we will have our regular Tuesday business meetings, 8 a.m. with the break on September 7th.
Madam Chair, next Tuesday that we're doing the training, will that just be part of our normal agenda? And then we'll just go into essentially an executive session for that 2, 3, 4 hours and then end the regular meeting? Or are we doing it as a separate meeting with a separate time later in the day? Either one works for me. I'm just curious which way we want to go.
I'm not sure we're able to lock that in right now. We probably need to get in touch with ESRI. But Director Schmidt, do you have any initial comments on that?
Mark, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, sorry, what was the exact question for Esri?
What's their availability for training next Tuesday?
What I sort of put on the books to ask for a hold is 11:30 to 3:30 Arizona time. So hopefully that everybody could have an early lunch if that works for you.
And my question then would be to Brett and to both our lawyers. Would we then want to notice that as a separate meeting?
Yes, we would go out of one meeting and we would have a special notice for the second meeting.
And in terms of timing, I don't anticipate a robust business meeting in the early morning. So I think that there will be time between the business and then the subsequent training if it were to happen at 11:30.
Is that a yes for 11:30?
It works with me, commissioners.
It's fine with me.
Let's go with it.
Okay.
A 8 a.m. business meeting and then 11:30 executive session training session with ESRI, and it will be agendized per council's recommendations of how to do that.
I'll do that. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay. With that, we'll move to agenda item number 12, closing of public comments. Please note, members of the commission may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. With that, we move to agenda item number 13, adjournment. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Lerner moves to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner York seconds.
With that, we will do a vote. Commissioner Meal,
Aye.
Commissioner Lerner,
Aye.
Commissioner York,
Aye.
and I forgot Vice Chair Watchman because I was out of order earlier in the meeting. I forgot your vote.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Aye. Vote aye.
And Chairwoman Newberg is an aye. With that, we will adjourn the meeting, and I look forward to seeing everybody next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.